Welcome to No Fences. I'm Earnest Spencer, the host. I also have a special guest and good friend of mine with me tonight. His name is Doug Hathaway. He can give you some of his background in a minute. We're going to talk about behaviors and beliefs, and I think he's going to do it on with the his perspective is going to be about adults, and my perspective is going to be about kids. But I want to introduce you to Doug, and I'm going to let Doug introduce himself.
My name is Doug Hathaway, and I'm a certified addictions counselor. At this moment, I'm retired. I had spent 26 years in the addiction field, with 15 of those doing substance abuse groups at the Michigan Department of Corrections. Then I've worked at other substance abuse clinics and have my own experience with addiction. So there's a lot of years of dealing with subjects such as what we're going to deal with tonight.
Okay. We picked a chapter out of the book. The book we deal with is Why Did I Do That? And Doug's done a lot of work with, like he said, with addiction and stuff. I think he said you did it in the prisons, and I've listened to him talk in a different venue, and he's a very smart man, and he's helped a lot of people with the knowledge he had. So we're talking about beliefs and behavior. I told him I used to deal with kids, and I would find out when the kids had problems. If I went and talked to one of their parents, the problem normally started at home. Case in point, an example. All of my grandchildren have went to Washington School. So I want to throw this out there too, to my granddaughter and my grandson. Good job on one going to 6th grade, and one got 4 awards for kindergarten. But because I'm so tied into that school, and I've done so much stuff because I've had so many grandchildren there, maybe 8, 9 years ago, I was taking them to school, and there was 6 kids sitting in an office for fighting. So I used to run an after-school program, so they allowed me to deal with the kids, even though I wasn't doing an after-school program at the time. And I knew if it was 6 kids there for fighting, it was 12 kids that had fought, because they bring in the ones that they think started the fight. And she said, Mr. Spencer, you do all this stuff for kids. Can you help us today? Because we got more unusual amount of kids fighting today. And I said, yeah. So I pulled 3 of them out, 4 of them out to the side, one at a time, and I talked to them. I talked to 5 of the 6. And I found out that they either got drugs problems in their house with their parents, alcohol problems in their house with their parents, food stamps being sold off for dope, so they're not eating right, having to take care of younger children because the parents are off doing something else. And all of these issues, they come into school with them. So they're already revved up and ready to fight before they get there. And another thing was a lot of kids used to come to school hungry, so they came up with a breakfast program. So now they feed the kids. And I really have to, thank Washington for the stuff they do with kids and how they push the kids to do well. And I'm sure you've run into stuff similar to that, just on a higher level.
I've dealt with a lot of people, like you say, that they're a lot further along, and they have children of their own. And some of them, they have addiction problems. I've had people that their sons, cousins, half the families in the penitentiary. And it's our families pretty much to where everybody was involved in the criminal life. So anything like that, that's all become normal. So people don't believe that there's anything wrong with it because everybody I know does that.
Right.
So what happened is they got the belief that that was okay. And the same way people at times, there's a lot of younger kids or whatever, and in some neighborhoods that this belief that going to prison is the thing that you do.
Right. And I could really relate to that. I have a grandson who's in prison now. His dad went to prison. He's got 3 brothers. All 3 of them have went to prison. His dad came out of prison. My grandson ended up in prison. Now his dad's back in prison because his grandmother just died. She lived in Vegas, and I knew the rest of the family. So, you know, it's easy to see that pattern and deal with that pattern. There was another thing, I'm losing my train of thought, but I was just thinking, and I know you can confer with this. When I started our program, Brother to Brother, we had a program, Brother to Brother, where we were trying to keep young men out of prison and jails, and the courts would send them to this program, and we'd have to counsel them. And you know, a lot of them young men come from that background where they didn't have a father in their home. And I found out that, and you probably know this as well as I do, homeless fathers, I'll say 80%, I'll start at 71 and just use 80%. But of the men in prison, most of the ones that can't read, most of the ones that come back for us to prison, most of the ones that are in there for sexual assaults, and a few other things, domestic violence grew up in fatherless homes. I used to have the exact statistics, that's what I said. And they grew up in fatherless homes, so they don't have that father figure to look up to learn how to be a man.
Oh, yes. That's, so they get it, they're gonna get it somewhere. Beliefs, nobody was born with a set of beliefs. So they adopted the beliefs of the people, or what they saw around them, what they heard around them, what they saw around them. And then I would always say, then you went to school. And then here came some more beliefs. And if you got into addiction, here's even more beliefs, how you do this and you do that. And people would move along this trail to sometimes people doing, for sure, possibly harder drugs, but for sure kind of hustling, we'll call it, on a deeper level. In other words, somebody that at one time shoplifted, retail fraud, boosting, whatever you want to call it, was there to maybe graduating to breaking and entering, to sometimes armed robberies and things like that. And I've known people that it's gone all the way to murder.
And I can relate to that because I grew up with, me and Kenny were talking about something yesterday, how when you grow up in a real, how do I say this without trying to look important, when you grow up in a really nice home and your aunts and uncles, grandmother, grandfather got decent jobs, your mother, you expected to live up to that. And sometimes, you know, you go astray, use drugs or something like that, it can mess up that belief system. And we were talking about that yesterday. I had my uncles and stuff did a lot of stuff, truck drivers, etc., doctors, lawyers, but I had an uncle that worked with Capone. He was a straight out thug. And I can remember I was about 11 when he died, and I remember somebody saying nobody messed with this family because of Earl. And, you know, if 10 people got killed in the neighborhood, he killed 8 of them and contracted the other 2. Because he was tough. And I was a kid, so I didn't learn all of what he was until I got older. But I can remember something he did tell me. He said, I know everybody around here think I'm tough, and I am tough. He said, but I want you to know, there's always somebody tougher than the man to think he tough. So as crazy as he was, he admitted that. There's some people out there more crazy than he is. And, you know, we're seeing that today with the youth. That's my issue. The last show we talked about, I think it was me and Mike, if it wasn't me and Dexter, but we talked about kids in the hood killing each other and having each other. You mentioned something about going to jail. Kids in jail pose, and I don't understand that, you know.
I worked at the handling unit, which used to be called the Michigan Training Unit. And that's where they, at one time, decided they were going to put all the younger felons in there. At one time, it was like only supposed to be from 18 to 23.
Okay.
And yeah, there was a lot of gang activity. There was always somebody getting marched off to segregation. You know, I would go in there and work, and yeah, people would tell me about putting locks in socks and stuff like that, and splitting people's heads open and things like that. And it was just something that was done. Yeah. And again, you know, there's that protection thing, and then there was naturally at that particular prison, there were the sexual offenders, And the one thing that I found, not with all of them, but quite a few that I had in my groups, kind of fit a little bit what you talked about. Couldn't read, really, they had their thinking or their cognitive abilities were majorly low. They were possibly mentally deficient. Not possibly, they were.
Right.
And they just, somewhere along the line, got that idea that that was kind of okay, and they ended up in the penitentiary, and then they would become kind of victims of the other people that were around them.
Right.
Because there's real strong belief systems in the penitentiary. I mean, same way in the street.
Right.
There's strong ones. I would talk to clients in that setting and would kind of break it down that they were going to be dealing with breaking two codes. One was the one from the penitentiary, and the other one was the street one about drugs. So they had two things that they're going to have to deal with, and it's all what we're talking about is changing my belief, which is changing my perception of a situation, how to handle a thing.
Yeah, we made a couple of quotes before, because I want to hear more about what you're talking about. We had a couple of quotes that we stated at the beginning of the thing, that you said something about a half a lie.
Yeah, there's that thing. Is there a difference between a half a lie and a whole lie?
Right.
And no, there isn't. There is no difference. But some people believe because I left a little piece out, I wasn't really lying.
Right.
I just didn't tell you that other part.
And I heard the same thing from a friend of mine, just in a different term. He said a half truth is a whole lie, and it's the same thing we're saying. And it is a lot of codes, and I've never been in prison, but I've dealt with a lot of people in and out of prison, first cousins. I have 5 police officers in my family. I had a lawyer in my family, a doctor. I grew up, but I also, y'all know me from Taking Back the Village, know I'm far from this nice person, because I did Vietnam, and I grew up in gang banging in the city. And I look at some of these kids out here on the street today, and they call themselves gang bangers. And I know if you took them to where you come from or where I come from, put them on the corner, they turn into a pile of shit, because they have no idea what real gang bangers or real thugs are. They just think they are.
And a lot of it, and I even found, towards, for some years, even in addiction, the people on the street were younger and younger. And even the old timers that were out there obtaining drugs, whichever way we want to call it, use that term, would usually get real worried about these young guys, because they would always say these young guys don't care.
Right.
And somebody told me a long time ago, somebody that don't care is a very dangerous individual.
And when I went to treatment, and I could say that on here, I went to treatment about a year ago, but I was in Chicago, where my brother lives on the north side. It's a pretty rough area. But forget that, it's a very rough area. But he lives on a corner. So I can sit in his front room, the way the windows is made, the house is flat, but it got windows that come out, that the building kind of, and I can literally sit on his couch, watch TV here, and watch the dope dealer, because he on the corner, right across the street. And I watched, this happened as fast as I'm finna talk about it. I'm sitting there, excuse me, I'm sitting there, guy sitting in a little chair by a steel rod fence, selling dope. So he got the chair kind of leaned back. One guy gets out the car, his car pulled up. One guy out of the car had some money in his hand, like he was coming to buy some dope. When he got close to him, he pushed him backward. And his chair was tilted just enough that when he pushed him backwards, he was up against the fence. He grabbed the chair leg. As he doing that, another one coming. So now, one of them going in the left pocket, one of them going in the right pocket. He's up against the fence with his head in the fence. And his body, because of the way he in the chair, he can't get away. And it took about as long as it took me to tell you that. And they were back in the car, okay, and gone. And his young friends didn't have a chance to react, okay? But, and like you say, them young boys, they don't care. They will do whatever they think they need to do. And that's insanity, but it's those belief systems, like you said, if they grow up in that all their life, That's what they believe. And to touch on that real quick, I want to hear some more about. But I learned with these young folks here, and a lot of them in Chicago, we found a lot of younger drug dealers because their parents were strung out on drugs, and all the money was gone out of the house, and they watched where the money went, so they knew that was the easiest way to make money. And I've seen a lot of the young men that have gone to prison and dealt with drugs. That's how that works.
Oh, yeah, it's always gonna be, there we go back to, you know, what we learn is what we practice,
Right.
what we practice is what we become.
Mm.
And so we have that thing that's how I learned how to do this or how to do that. And like you said, here's the quick, easy way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing we've possibly learned is what's the easiest way to do something without having to do anything.
Right. And they don't really look at the consequences. Because y'all know how much work I do with youth and how long I've been doing it. And I find a lot of young men between 16 and 19, even younger, that say they ain't gonna live to be 30. So they try everything, or try to do everything now because they're afraid they're gonna die. And you know, it's for me, it's hard to deal, hard to deal with them. But they all come and talk to me because I've been doing kid work for 25 years. So I know a lot of children now who I work with their mother and their grandmother when they were kids and took them to games and the stuff I do. So I get a lot of people to talk to me. Plus having 37 grandchildren and 7 children I raised by myself, I know a lot of people through my kids. And you know, it's sometimes now I'll drive down the street, people holler out, "Hey, Uncle Ernie, how you doing?" Or I see someone in the store and they'll be like, "You remember me when I was a kid?" Oh, I had a young man, this was still working at the post office, so it was a while back, but I was doing a Black History presentation. I was the EEO coordinator. And we got some artifacts from the library, from the museum, cases with art. And I was taking them back, and we had them for 3 days. I was taking them back, and I crossed paths with this young man. And I spoke, and he spoke. And then we got about 10 feet away, and he turned around. He said, "You remember me?" I said, "I'm not sure." No, he said, "You probably don't remember me." I said, "I'm not sure." He said, "You coached me playing basketball." He said, "I remember you talked to us about drugs and how you used to use and how you've been out on the street doing this stuff." And he says, "Don't ever stop coaching ball." And I said, "Huh?" He said, "When you coached me, all I wanted to be was like my brother." And he was a dope dealer. He said, "My brother doing 40 years right now. I graduated from college in 6 months." You know, and it was kind of like God reinforcing I was doing something right. Because right before that, I was questioning what I was doing with some of the kids, because a lot of them I seen go the wrong way. So, you know, and I know you've seen those things in the prison. You get the after effects of what I was dealing with when they're young.
Right. You got them at the start. I got them towards the end. I would deal with people anywhere from the age of 18 to sometimes 60 years old. You know, I've dealt with people that have been incarcerated 35 years.
Right.
I had a friend that I used to run with that died a few years ago, and he went to prison back in 1974. So I think by the time he died in prison, he had done about 38 years, and he was never going to go anywhere.
Right. And you really, you know, institutionalized, which was first brought to my attention in, what was the movie? You know what I'm talking about, Shawshank Redemption.
Shawshank.
That people get so accustomed to being in prison. I guess I've heard somebody say it's a comfortable place to be because you ain't got to do nothing. They tell you what to do.
Yep.
And, you know, I had a brother-in-law that me and him fell out because he went to prison or to jail 8 times in less than 2 years. And he got mad at me. I said, "Man, why don't you just ask the judge for a key? Because every time you do this," my mother-in-law called her mama going through change, dad going through change, trying to bail you out, everybody, family trying to gather money. I said, "Why don't you just take a key like the guy on Andy, you know, Otis?"
Yeah.
Otis knew he had a problem. So Otis just go lock himself in jail. But I understand what you're saying, and then a lot of them, again, what we talked about earlier, can't read, can't write. You know, it's somebody, and another thing that you and I do together, and he said something, and I won't give his name, but he said he spent 18 years behind bars. And He said, I went in at 17. I didn't know how to read and write when I come out. I spent 18 years in there. So I still, this many years old, and I still don't know how to read and write. And, you know, sometimes when I pray to God and thank him for the parents and grandparents that I had, because they did give me an education. And I've been that close to going to jail several times. I mean, you know, I did the drug game. I was a drug dealer. So I just got blessed.
Yeah, that's what I always have told people, that I was only a matter of split seconds. I would tell people that I worked with in prison, I said, because they knew I had used, been active in addiction, and I said, the only difference between me and you is split seconds in situations like that. It wasn't that I didn't do anything that didn't call for that. It's just God saw something else, and right at that point in time, if I kept pushing the issue, you know, there maybe wouldn't have been, it just would have been that.
I know what you. My grandfather had some political ties in Chicago. He used to work for the original Mayor Daley. Thus, most of the people in my family had political jobs. And I mentioned the police officer. There's been a couple of times the police officers in my family, and the people in power, knowing my family, that I walked away from stuff that could have put me in jail for 10, 15 years. So I know exactly what you're saying, you know, right on the brink. So I'd like you to expound on some more stuff, because you got a lot of knowledge in there.
It's the thing that, you know, about beliefs. When we start, I would always ask the question, where did we get our beliefs from? I said, who are some of the first people that we got our beliefs from? And you've already talked about it. Well, it was our parents, okay? And they maybe showed some good values and things like that, but then I got into the outside world, and my view of, again, at least for me, what I thought was cool was something else.
Right.
You know, my dad worked 33 years at Chrysler. My other brother was a teacher for like 40 years. Another one was a Detroit cop for 33 years. And then there was me. You know, so it was that thing. So they kind of stayed with those beliefs that you go to work and you do this and that. And I kind of went the other way. And then once I got involved, it's kind of just keep on going. And I think, at least for addicts, that what happens is some of the other people view some things the same way. I'll use the example of what we refer to as a thinking error, and it's called want it now.
Right.
So you start out as a child, want it now, want it now, want it now. You know, yesterday wouldn't have been soon enough. So now I'm supposed to, they say we're supposed to grow out of this self-centeredness,
Right.
go through adolescence and come out on the other side and not be so self-centered. Well, as I said, I've dealt with a lot of people, and I would say that my last job, you know, at a clinic, and I would say to people that, I said, you stopped growing emotionally when you started to use.
Right.
So I said, look around, look out there, look in the waiting room, look at these other places, and most likely you will see somebody throwing a fit. How old does it look like they are when they're throwing this fit?
Right.
So there's that thing of, in order to grow up, we have to have some examples of grown-up behavior. You know, and there's programs that help us with those things. There's counselors, but we have to be around somebody in order to get a new view.
Okay.
If I hang around with the same old people, they got the same old view. I would tell people, I said, if you're looking to stay clean, I wouldn't go to the dope house to ask somebody how do you stay clean? Because I don't think you'll run into some people that have been to treatment, they got a little bit of information, but they're not using it. So if we have this thing that if we don't see somebody doing something, in other words, an example,
Right.
we don't believe it. And for sure, again, we go back to beliefs. If I don't believe I can change, I'm not gonna change.
Right.
I'm dead, I'm done, until I start to get that belief. So in my job, it's been an issue of trying to encourage people that change is possible. And another group, I know we normally talk about men, but a lot of the females have major self-esteem issues and things like that. And I remember years ago, back in the 80s, there were some statistics on women that had gone to residential drug treatment that at least 80% of them had been sexually abused.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so they have all those issues. And then I've seen it with abuse cases to where women actually feel like I can't do any better, so I better stay because having somebody's better than having nobody because I'm not worth anything if I'm not with somebody.
Yeah, that's the battered woman syndrome. And you know, I've never really said this before, but I had a first cousin. And I'm assuming she's dead now because I only met her twice in my life. 3 times I've seen her. But I always thought, I had a first cousin named Willie. My dad had 1 brother and 1 sister. It was only 4 grandchildren came out of that. And actually 5. Betty was my aunt's daughter, but when she got pregnant with Betty years and years ago, she gave Betty away. So Betty always thought we hated her as a family, but we didn't know. I didn't learn she was my cousin until I was 40 years old. I was talking to my grandmother, and I said, yeah, that's Willie's sister. And I was thinking it was Willie's sister through his daddy. And my grandmother said, no. Dorothy had Betty and gave her away. But Betty, she was born in Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, and Wisconsin. She served in all 3 of those prisons. But she used to rob banks and shit because she said nobody loved her. She was abused, and we never knew. I never knew as a kid and as we grew up. None of us knew until later on. My grandmother didn't know and found out. But because of those circumstances, and I'm sure she was molested, she just went on a rampage. She had relationships with women, and she was a pretty big girl, not healthy. She was attractive, but she was just tall. They would dress up as man and woman and rob banks and rob stores and stuff. And they would get away with it because everybody was looking for, a man and a woman. And then all of a sudden you see these 2 women in bathing suits or whatever, and they dressed up. We got about 2 minutes left. Is there anything you want to say in the last 2 minutes?
It's the biggest thing that I believe is that we have to be around people that can encourage us to see something different in ourselves than possibly what we've seen. Self-esteem is such a major issue. Self-esteem, self-worth, self-value, whatever words we want to put on it, that we have to start to believe that we're of worth. Same way we have to encourage other people that they are of worth. And I find it rather difficult at times that, like I said earlier, working with female population in my last job, it was like trying to beat your head against a brick wall to try and get somebody very nice looking. I would always tell them, you got the biggest heart,
right?
And you're worth this and that. You're worth more than you're giving yourself. But that's the big thing is that work on self-esteem. Again, so I'm gonna have to change my belief that says, instead of saying I'm not worth anything, to, hey, I'm worth a whole lot.
Worth something. All right, I want to thank you, Doug, for being here, and we're at the end of this show. And good night, and we're out.